All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Lesson 3 of Fader's Music's free online beginner guitar lessons. I'm Anthony.
I'm Jordan.
And we're going to hop right into this one. I'll explain a little bit. We're going to take a little bit of a detour from our last week's content where we were looking at how to strum chords and place different strumming patterns. We're going to look at something a little bit different, but somewhat familiar, which is scales and how to read scale charts. So we're going to flip over to the first page. All right.
So you might be wondering to yourself, what is a scale? So scale is a group of notes that basically when played together are going to sound really nice. So we're going to be looking at two main ones today. That's the E minor pentatonic and the A minor pentatonic. So what is a pentatonic scale? Well, essentially what we're doing is we're taking the major scale or a minor scale in this case, and just using 5 notes out of that scale, hence the prefix penta. So we'll take a look at the chart here, we'll kind of dissect it, and then we'll go into playing it. So you might notice that these look familiar to the chord charts that we were playing earlier. So again, here with our minor pentatonic, we have our nut there as our thick dark line on the side. And then we have some cymbals going up here and going through our strings. So instead of trying to place our finger all across this, we're going to play strings individually. So what these squares are is they're representing the root note of the scale we're going to be playing. So in this case, we're doing the E. So that means that this open string here is the E, that this one right here is an E, and this one right here is an E. The white circles represent open notes that we're playing, and then the dots represent notes that we're playing with our fingers down on the fretboard. So in this case, we're going to be going open E, 3rd fret E, open A, 2nd fret A, open D, 2nd fret D, open G, 2nd fret G, open B, 3rd fret B, open high E, 3rd fret high E. So, and you can actually see that down on this chart here. We have a little bit of a zigzag pattern. So if this is confusing on the PDF as well as we have here, you can actually see the order. So it's going kind of in a zigzag pattern this way.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Another good way to think of it is like the order you go from it is from left to right, from bottom to top. It's another way of sort of thinking of it.
So we're going to just play through this E minor for you just so you can get an idea of how it sounds like first, and then we'll talk about the A minor after that. So I have an open, then 3rd, then open, then 2nd, then open, then 2nd, open, then 2nd, another open, 3rd, open, and 3rd. So there's a scale. All right, now we'll talk about the A minor pentatonic. So you might notice on this one, we don't have that dark line on the side to represent our nut. And that's because we're not playing this scale on the first few frets of the guitar. We're actually going to be starting it on the 5th fret. So we're going to read it exactly the same, and we're just going to picture moving this chart over a little bit. So now we're going 5th fret, 8th fret, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 8th, 5th, 8th. And again, we have our squares representing where our root note is. So that's an A, A, A. Now, this time we're not playing open notes here with the white circles, but we are playing those all on the 5th fret. So we're going to play through this one for you guys now, and then we're going to talk about some different things to keep in mind when you're playing through these scales. So we have 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. All right.
So
Just flip to this page here.
we're going to slip to this one. We will slip back to the other one after we go through these.
So number one, playing in position. So what do we mean by that? When you're looking at your charts and you're thinking about your fretting hand, your left in most cases, you kind of want to envision that each finger is restricted to a certain fret, right? So if I'm playing in the first position here, my first finger is going to play my first fret, my second finger is going to play my second, third is third, fourth, and so on. And what that does is it helps us get used to locking in and holding proper form as we're moving up and down the guitar neck. All right. Alternate picking. What that means is as we're moving up and down the strings with our pick, we're going up and down. We're not just doing downstrokes and we're not just doing upstrokes. Because if I'm just doing downstrokes, it's not as fast or efficient as if I alternate pick. So I'm going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. All right. Pinky anchor. So what that means, you may have noticed the way Anthony and I play is we take the pinky on our picking hand and we're kind of resting it wherever is most comfortable for you on the actual pick guard or the bottom of the guitar underneath its strings itself. And that just helps support your hand as you're moving up and down on the strings itself. So that'll take a little bit of time to kind of find your groove and find a nice position for you, but it really makes all the difference. Curling up the hand like this and kind of going through it, some people will play like that. Personally, I can't do it. I'm making mistakes going up and down all the time right now. So that pinky anchor can really make a difference, especially when we're learning. Pointing the pick away. We don't want it to be the pick itself. We don't want it to be exactly straight up and down because you can get kind of jammed up and stuck in between the strings. So if you get just a little bit of an angle on it, you get a little bit more movement that way. And then finally, hold more pick. That's kind of what we were talking about in our last lesson, just making sure you're choking up on the pick as much as you can, get a nice, firm, solid grasp on it, and that should keep your pick from flubbing away or falling out of your hand.
Yeah, that's it. At this point, if anybody had any questions about any of these particular points, we'd definitely be open to taking some questions.
Well, one question that I know we get asked a lot is how do scales, we're talking about scales here, how do they work with chords? Like how do you use them in conjunction with one another? That's something that scales seem to be over here and chords seem to be over there, and a lot of people have a lot of hard time smushing them together so that you can actually do something with them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
The sort of short answer that would end up involving a lot more explanation down the road would be that everything's written in what are known as musical keys, and when you write in a key, it sort of dictates what notes you can play, what scale you can play, and what chords you can play. And you take a scale like the major scale, and in the major scale, you can extrapolate different chords from it. In a major scale, you have what are like 7 different notes. C is probably the easiest one to explain because there are no sharp or flat notes. So the letters you use are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then it goes back to C in an infinite loop. And
it's like all the white keys on a piano, right?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like all the white keys on a piano. And basically what you do to sort of create chords out of that real simply is it's almost like if you were to play a white key and skip a white key and play a white key and skip a white key. So it's like playing 3 keys with a key in between them. And if you keep moving your hand on the piano like that, you're sort of just playing these different basic chords. And so that's it sort of gets into a theory a little bit, how to mush them together. But a good way to look at it is if you're playing an E minor pentatonic scale, if you play the chord E minor, it sort of goes together.
So the chords and the scales are made up of the same notes.
Exactly.
Sense, right? Okay.
Yeah, so there's 3 different notes in the E minor chord that occur in the E minor pentatonic scale. So when you play that scale over that chord, it always works. Another good thing to do is you can actually take that E minor pentatonic or that A minor pentatonic, and you can go on like YouTube or wherever. YouTube's a great source if you just look up backing track E minor pentatonic or backing track A minor pentatonic. and they'll give you tracks that when you're playing the notes in there and sort of messing around with the scale, it'll always fit over those chords because it's just fixed to that key and fixed to that scale.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Do you want to maybe give a couple more examples of like maybe a chord and a scale that kind of work well together? Like just I don't know, just improvise something or whatever.
Sure. Well, even if I were to just play an E minor and then a G and a D. So all the notes that Anthony was using were in that first scale that we looked at.
Right on. So the chords and the scales go together.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Nobody asked that specifically here, but that was something that comes up a lot, right?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Right on. Perfect. Cool. Yeah. Haven't had too many questions. We've got a request for Play Heart of the Sunrise.
Heart of the Sunrise, wow.
I'm not going to ask you guys if you learned Rock and Robin.
I did learn it.
Did you?
I did learn it. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Not right now.
We'll save it. Best for last.
Do you want to recap a little bit on the?
Yeah, so we'll talk about these points with this in mind. So if we're looking at the E minor pentatonic over here, we talked about playing in position, which is really important. So in this, you'd be playing in the first 3 frets. So what you do with this is playing in the first 3 frets here, you're assigning 1 finger to 1 fret, right? Just as Jordan explained. And then you're just using whichever finger falls there. So in this case, you're playing mostly open notes, but here you're playing the 3rd fret. On the low E, you'd be using your 3rd finger, your ring finger. And then when you go up to the next one, you play open and you play on the 2nd fret. So in the first position, you'd be using your 2nd finger, your middle. And you use your middle on the next 2 fretted notes, and then your ring again on the last 2 notes there.
That way your hand can stay in a relatively stable position. Your fingers are doing all the work rather than moving around.
Yeah, like some people have a habit when they first start out of trying to use like just their index finger or something and moving it around to all the different spots. And it makes it very difficult to learn how to articulate. And you really want to develop those fingers. So another really great thing that you can do, really good exercise that Jordan will know really well, and a lot of the other guitar teachers, the 4-finger warm-up. The 4-finger warm-up, what you do is you start on the 1st fret with your 1st finger, and you're playing exactly what Jordan's doing there. Every single note of those first 4 frets on each of those strings. And you can play it forwards and backwards. It's a really good warm-up exercise to get all of your fingers moving and get them ready to work on playing these different scales. It gives you an opportunity to really focus in because you don't have to worry about any specific notes. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to the top, and then 4, 3, 2, 1 all the way back. So you don't have to think too much about it. So then you can sort of go and work through each of these different points. Just playing in position, so using each of your fingers for each of the frets. Alternate picking down on your 1st note, up on your next, and continuing 3rd note, 4th note, down, up, up. You can work on your pinky anchor, keeping your pinky sort of in place. And the nice thing with the pinky is it doesn't have to be glued in one spot exactly. You can move it around. It's more about making contact. So when you're moving between strings, what's happening is you're developing your muscle memory in your arm here. So your arm gets really used to automatically going to the different strings and going between them. And then, of course, you're pointing away. You can work on that too. You can, even if you get hung up on changing strings, you can just sort of work on one string at a time just 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over on the same string, and just work on that alternate picking and trying to angle your picks so that the point is sort of away from the direction that you're picking. That really helps you get through those notes.
So yeah, there's all kinds of little pieces of the puzzle that you sort of try to, work on in concert with one another, so that it makes it easier for you in the long run, right? So
Yeah.
scales are just a good way to get your fingers. A lot of beginners, their fingers don't move that way, right? So I mean, scales are a great way, to learn about music, but also just to get your fingers moving, and it just helps get your being able to play, switch between chords and all that kind of stuff better too, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So all of these different things will sort of come to you at different rates for sure. So like, I mean, you might find that just being able to just remembering to put your pinky will be like a challenge at first, right? I've had a lot of students that I have to remind them, rest your pinky over and over, and they'll do it for a bit and then stop. So it's something that you got to watch and train yourself. Same thing with alternate picking. Watch and try to find when you make a mistake.
do you want to recap anything from the earlier 2 lessons that we've done at all, or anything like that? Or
We can definitely sort of talk about how some of these might apply to chords as well.
Sure. So I just want to go back to this one for a second. So the first few chords that we've covered, so the C's, the G's, D's, E minors specifically, the E minor pentatonic, that's going to fit really nicely into that. So whether that means someone's playing the chords or you're using one of those backing tracks and you're practicing this scale over top of it, or maybe there's a piece of music or this scale is playing in the background and you're trying to play those chords to a beat underneath that, they're going to sound really nice together and they're going to mesh really well. The reason being is the 5 notes that we're using in this pentatonic are, I always think of it as the G major, so Gabda, G, A, B, D, E. Those are the 5 notes that we're hitting through here. So even though we have 12 notes that we're actually playing, or 12 different sequences of notes, we're only playing 5 notes. So that's that G, A, B, D, and E. And then the same thing would apply with the A minor. We're only going to be playing 5 notes. We're going to have 12 different instances of those 5 notes, but it's only the 5. So in the case of A minor, maybe like an A minor and a C and a G, those would be 3 chords that would fit in that whole A minor bubble.
Yeah, so that's why you see those root notes repeat themselves, because you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different notes and then repeat it an octave higher. So it's the same thing, but just a higher pitch.
just putting a couple comments on here to with the 4-finger warm-up and going on YouTube looking for backing tracks, which is a great tool as well for applying some of this stuff and practicing, rather than just sitting there and just doing it by yourself. You can have some music going on behind you that actually ties it all together musically, basically, right?
For sure.
Oh yeah. And what's really cool too is if you're playing electric guitar, I mean, works either way with acoustic as well. If you're playing electric guitar, some of those guitar amps like the Mustangs and the ID cores and stuff that we sell here have auxiliary inputs. So if you have an auxiliary input on your amp, you can plug your phone right into your amp and play those backing tracks through the same speaker that you're playing your guitar through. And some of the acoustic amps even have those sorts of inputs too. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, as far as applying these scales. Other things you can do too is if you find it relatively easy to ascend and descend the scale, you can try mixing it up by going up in groups of 3 or groups of 4, or even I call it leapfrog, where you play the first note, then the third note, then the second note, then the fourth, then the third and the fifth, etc. And so there's all sorts of different ways you can go up in, like I said, 3. Right, so it gives you this sort of groups of 3, right, sort of thing that you can play.
They don't have to be played in that order.
Exactly. So there's a lot of room for exploration once you sort of get used to it and really get into it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Something to note that these aren't the only positions of these scales as well.
Mhm.
So this is the first position of the E minor pentatonic, but that pentatonic scale is actually found all over the guitar neck. So if you're looking online or anything to find more scales, you might find, oh, okay, well, there I see an E minor pentatonic that's all the way up here on the 7th fret. So how does that relate? Well, it's still, again, just those same 5 notes. We're just playing them on a different place of the guitar. So once you get comfortable with, say, this first position of the E minor pentatonic, it's good to move on to your second position. So that would be, just for example, it's right there. So same 5 notes. And once you've learned all those all up the guitar neck, then that's where you start to see a lot of these players and these guitar players that are running all over the guitar neck, and they might be playing in just one key. It's because that scale is going to move all across. Same with the A minor, same with the G major, whatever it may be. It's going to be everywhere on the guitar.
It's one of the cool things about guitar, but also one of the confusing things about guitar, because you can play the same note in so many positions that's where tab, which I think we're going to cover a bit more tab on lesson 4, right?
Yep,
right,
on
yeah.
Thursday, same time.
Yeah, Thursday guitar tab, which is, I know people have been asking about that. It's a really handy way of writing music down for guitar players. It's
Yep.
maybe a little bit of a cheat, but it's a good way of great way of doing it. And to me, it's just a really good way of doing it. It tells you where to put your fingers, right? So
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. And we'll show we'll kind of combine and bring the two ideas together in the next lesson. We'll be looking at, we'll write out some individual note stuff, show you how like one of these scales looks like on there, and also how some of the chords look like on tab as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think A minor, C, and G I use a lot. So okay, perfect. Yeah. I think that kind of covers everything. Maybe just a close-up of that 4-finger exercise might not be a bad idea.
Sure.
We got a couple people asking about that. So
Okay. Let's see. I don't actually have a pick. I was faking using a pick. It's the old just put your fingers together and play. So let's see here. How is this for distance?
that is good, nice and close.
Sure, yeah. So in the 4-finger, it's literally 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the same thing backwards. Now, did my picking hand get in there? Or should I?
No, I don't think it did actually.
Sure, we'll get my picking hand just so that we can see here.
I do have a question here. Do you guys play any other instruments other than guitar?
I play like a few different stringed instruments, like ukulele and mandolin, a little bit of bass. The rules, once you kind of understand the guitar and music, they all kind of blend together, and you're able to figure that kind of stuff out. So
Yeah, and yeah, I'd pick up ukulele, bass, whichever, those sorts of things. The fretted instruments are pretty easy to pick up once you really know one of them. It's not too foreign. The only thing with bass is that you got to push a little bit harder and develop a little tougher calluses. I also play extended range instruments like 7-string and 8-string guitars as well.
I think that's why a lot of people like starting on ukulele, because it's a stringed instrument with frets, and it's
Yeah.
a little maybe less intimidating than a guitar. But I mean, a lot of the principles are still exactly the same, right? So maybe one of these lessons that will actually bring a little bit of ukulele into the mix, which I think would go over really well.
Well, yeah. Honestly, a quick tip for ukulele players: when you're looking at any of our scale diagrams from our previous lessons, or chord from our previous or scales from this, just take away the bottom two strings and the shapes are the same. It's not the same because it's not tuned quite the same, but the intervals are the same. So if you play these notes, you'll be playing a minor pentatonic scale. It won't be E, it'll be 5 steps up. So it'll be like a A minor pentatonic.
So it's just the same scale, just a different name for it, basically. 'Cause it's a different
Yeah.
key.
Yeah, basically.
We do have a quick question here.
Yeah.
Quick chord question. If a piece of music says you need to use a capo on fret 1, can you play the chords without the capo or capo? We'll see. That'll be a debate for next time. Does it just change the key you're playing in?
So yes, essentially what a capo does is it changes the key that you're playing in. So you're shortening the scale length of your guitar. So if this is my guitar, as it were, and I take my capo and I put it on the 1st fret, now my scale length has changed, and I could, in theory, play my G chord here now with my capo there. So you got to watch your the song, like the actual piece of music that you're looking at, and see how they want you to do it. Because a lot of times, if it says capo 1 G chord, what it means is probably like a G sharp, because you've moved up that half step with your capo on the 1st there. So if it says G, it still wants a G shape, but now we're just kind of pretending that capo is the new nut of our guitar, and we're just moving up from there. But I can play that chord barred without a capo. So if that chord is a G capo 1, it's a G sharp like that.
So your finger is a bar chord, which is a whole other topic, and that's basically replacing what the capo does. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I can put my finger there, bar that 1st fret. I'm basically doing what the capo does for me, and I can play a chord.
There we go.
And then there's how you play it without the capo.
That was very good, right on. That was a very. Somebody might just say, "What is a capo?"
Yes.
That's not a terrible thing to ask.
Get one fired up here for you.
Well, that's good packaging. We'll grab one of these ones.
Yeah, those ones pop open.
Yeah.
And it's Canadian themed.
Canadian flag capo.
Perfect.
That is a capo.
So that's a capo. The idea is you just give it a squeeze, line it up as close as you can to that fret without going over. And now I'm on fret 1. So if my song is a capo 4, I'm just going to count up to my 4th fret. Do that. Just make sure that your strings aren't bunched up, because sometimes if you don't have the capo squeezed quite enough, you might bunch them up like that. So you just want to make sure that they're nice and loose. Squeeze down like that. And now I can just play all those 1st position chords that we talked about in a different key.
Yeah, same chord, it's just higher, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Generally, they're to accommodate singers, I think, probably, right? You have a different vocal range. Is
Yeah.
that the general idea with capos?
That, and sometimes you can just make it a little bit fresher when you're writing stuff, because you're technically playing a different chord, even though you're playing the same shape as what you're holding in the open note, like your sort of non-capoed open chord voicings. Now when you put your capo up there, you're playing a totally different chord, even though you're using the same shapes, so it gives you just an opportunity to be able to play more songs with less different chord shapes in your head.
There you go. Perfect. Some people call them cheaters, right?
I wouldn't call it cheating.
No, they're cool.
Right on. Cool. All right. What else we got here? They said that was a great answer about the capo, so well done.
Perfect.
guys.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that pretty much all the questions we had anyway. So unless you guys have anything to add, I think we can probably, maybe mention the guitar giveaway one more time, and then
Guitar giveaway.
yeah, we have to.
Yes.
On Thursday, we're going to announce how to enter to win it.
All right, cool. Yeah, so this Thursday we're going to announce how you can win one of these Fender CD60 acoustic guitars with a hard case. So tune in on Thursday, same time, 5:30. We're going to go over how to read tab. We'll show you sort of almost in a review style of what we have gone over so far, but in the form of tab. And then a couple of new things. But tune in so you can find out how to win one of these acoustic guitars, Fender CD60, and a hard case.
Right on. Cool. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, and
thanks, everybody, for watching.
yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you guys on Thursday.
Take care.